Make about 300,000.
Well, it's 11, but people are still coming in, so I think we'll give it a few more minutes. Everyone's showing up now.
So I think we have a pretty full body. Laura, do you want to?
Yeah. Okay. All right. So this, good morning, guys. Happy Sunday. This meeting, we're going to do something a little different. If you saw in Annie's email, we're going to try and make it a little shorter, a little more concise. She's going to be a little bit more in the background today, even though she is here, and she's taking roll call right now, and we will roll into reports first thing. So if you're a proxy or it's your first time, you can send her a DM, let her know who you're here for. All right, I'm going to share my screen somehow. Okay, all right, so yep, like I said, welcome to our February meeting. Moving on. Annie's favorite slide, we're community centered, we're here for each other. We're not a top-down hierarchy, and we seek to grow our community and nurture our community in all of our work. So this, Annie has been working on Chancellor's Council, SMVEA testimony, which you will hear more about later through the meeting. We will be touching on testimony and how to and things like that. The SMVA hearing was earlier this week. Mental health efforts update. I don't want to steal her thunder. And COVID and students update. These are mental health and COVID and students are all topics that we're talking about a lot now. And yeah, I'm not gonna go too much into that. Whatever concerns that you have, if you have any initiatives or ideas that you want to add to that conversation, reach out, because that's an ongoing effort. Bernetta, you want to start?
Sure. Similar to what basically Laura's saying is we have a lot of updates, but we don't want to steal anyone's thunder, because we're going to hear from all of our committee chairs and directors today briefly. So we're keeping our updates pretty short so we can accommodate our new meeting time. For me, what I've been working on as your VP of Undergraduate Affairs, I've been working closely with several of our committees. More specifically, the DEI Diversity Committee, as well as our Government Affairs Committees. So as we discussed sort of during our last full meeting and breakout sessions, we're looking at continuing to look at areas of student concern, such as fees, and looking at a number of different policies and bills, which they will go into here shortly. And diversity topics, we feel like we've only kind of scratched the surface here. And getting into issues that are affecting our students around diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we'll be working with the committee over the next couple of weeks to try to do a deeper dive there. We're also preparing to do some outreach along those lines. We'll be making an ask to all of you to help us identify the POCs for all of your student organizations, so we can determine any support that they need, as well as students at each of your institutions. So please be on the lookout for that correspondence. And when you receive it, the ask will be that you help us identify POCs for your student orgs related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are continuing student recruitment. We're always recruiting more students that want to get involved with USMSC with our committees. That'll be ongoing till year's end. So continue to spread the word for students at your institutions. And then lastly, I just wanted to mention Microsoft Teams and OneDrive. So for any committees that don't yet have your private channel, or you aren't sure how to set that up, let me know. I have a private channel for all of the committees already set up on Teams, so I can just add all of your members to your private channel. If you don't have access, let me know. If you can't get into OneDrive, just let me know. All right, and kudos to Government Affairs, because they're really using Teams, and it's great to see. All right, back to you, Laura.
Oh, thanks, Renetta. Okay, so we sent out that survey earlier a couple weeks ago, and I really appreciate all the responses that you shared to our feedback survey. We've already taken some of those suggestions on board. Some of the big themes that came out from that were COVID, shorter meetings, and more opportunities for collaboration. That's something that you guys really appreciate and enjoy about USMSC. And this month, I put a considerable amount of effort into supporting the work of our directors this month. That's one of the reasons why I don't want to steal their thunder. So facilitating that is a big priority. And in the process of facilitating plans, events, and communication this month, the same issues kept arising. So I wanted to touch on this for a minute. We are all touched by this pandemic in some way. While we advocate for the students that we represent, we can also support each other. Being honest with ourselves and each other about our limits, our capacity, and our needs allows others to step in and help. I don't think this is a semester or a year to be catering to our egos. Instead, let's be honest with each other about what we can do to help each other. So if there's, an idea you have, but you don't have the capacity to facilitate the whole thing, just, talk to each other. We have committees. We have lists of people that are willing to get engaged. You don't have to shoulder this burden all by yourself. So like the first slide said, we're a community, right? So we can lean on each other. And as we're advocating for our students, we should be doing that ourselves. Flexibility, forgiveness, and giving each other the benefit of the doubt can create the space that we need to manage these challenges and find our best path forward. And I think that empathy and patience really are two words that I want to impress into you as we're talking to each other. We're doing these initiatives and the work and everything. Just let's try to, I know it's hard sometimes because we'll be wrapped up in stuff and someone else will be wrapped up in stuff and we're not talking about what we need. But with communication, empathy, and patience, then I think everything will go smoothly. And lastly, I wanted to mention an opportunity that's come across our emails. It's called the University Blood Initiative. It's an organization that has partnered with other universities for blood drives, and they've reached out to USM to ask for help with their Push for Plasma campaign. They started it at the end of January in conjunction with the National COVID-19 Convalescence Plasma Project. So basically, people who have recovered from COVID-19 have developed antibodies in their plasma that can help others fight the disease, and plasma from these individuals is known as the COVID convalescent plasma, or CCP. They want to know if there's any student leaders that are interested in starting this campaign. And so if you are interested, or if you think your school or anyone you know is interested, send me an email and I will forward you their information. This could be a really great opportunity for somebody to give back and help out their students get through COVID and to shine as well. All right, moving on. Nate?
Hello, everybody. It's wonderful to see you all again. Just to offer a few updates, I know one issue that we've all been following very closely has been that of the mandatory student fees. So as many of you know, I spoke at our board meeting last month, our special meeting, and we addressed this concern with the presidents. There was then follow-up within the system office, and all of the presidents were asked to give a response, which they did. And essentially, when it comes to fees, we can tell you that our campuses have been communicating regularly, broadly, and frequently. And when it comes to the allocation of fees and what activities look like this semester, many of our activities in the spring semester across campuses mirror those from the fall. So a lot of that has just kind of rolled over. And when it comes to mandatory fees, specifically those athletic fees and those student activities fees, it's different on each campus, just because all of the mandatory fees are distributed at the purview of each university administration and campus. And so it is a little bit different. Some universities and institutions discounted their fees while others did not this semester. And it's also worth noting that the Global Campus and Center for Environmental Studies do not have athletic or student life fees. So it's not really a concern there. And I will just say a part of this continued conversation that it's important for us all to realize is that many of these fees relating to athletics go to fund fixed costs, which have not changed even in light of the pandemic. So that's a lot of your staffing and maintenance for buildings and programs. Those items have not changed, and so those costs still are relatively consistent, which is why some institutions have not been able to offer a discount in those fees there. And if there are any other further specific questions, I would welcome anyone to just reach out via email to myself, and we can also loop in Joe or Zakia, and we will try to get you the most appropriate response that we can, working with our friends in the system and Vice Chancellor Herbst, who sometimes can help offer a little bit of clarification regarding these issues that I know affect us all. But I did want you to know that the presidents have responded to this. They have shown genuine concern for our concerns, and they are being responsive to any questions that I've asked. And so thank you to the presidents and also the Chancellor's office and Denise for their help with that. And of course, Joe and Zakia, who have helped shepherd all those questions in the right direction. Also, a brief update, and I know this we'll get into more detail later. HB 792, which is the textbook tax bill that many of you know I've been working on, that has a hearing this Thursday, and so I know Government Affairs and Yvonne and Arsalan will be speaking about that in a little bit, but we've got great progress there. And also one final note is I know in the past we've been advertising the COVID Health Challenge, and I was actually one of the judges for that. It was very interesting to see everybody's submissions from across the system, and we expect to have winners announced for that most likely this coming week. And so be on the lookout for that as well, and all these great videos and social media posts that we'll now be able to share as well. So great things going on with the board and across the system, and that's what I've got. I saw that there was a hand raised, but I will, Laura, I don't know what you want me to do with that because I know we're trying to keep it brief, but I will ask for your direction there.
Dan, I think you have your own slide, but go ahead and speak up.
Yeah, this doesn't relate to my slide. Nate, so can you then compile what the president's responses were and what each school has done in relation to fees since you were in that meeting? I also do want to correct one thing. So in terms of the athletic fees, some of it does go to fixed costs, but I know Maryland's campus or College Park's campus, for example, about 75% goes to tickets. And I think that's more so what students' concerns are across our campuses, not those scholarships, not those, student staff support or fixed salaries, but the majority of the cost that's going to tickets that no one can utilize right now.
Sure. And so in response to that, I will say that, actually I'll answer your question, but first just broadly, these are issues that, your VPSAs are very involved with when it comes to student fees. And so as SGA presidents, I would encourage all of you to continue to engage with your VPSAs in this dialogue because it does look different across our institutions, and that's where they have the greatest purview. But when it comes to what's actually been done, each president did submit a response to the system. I will need to check with Denise, Joe, and Zakia with regard to what we can share from the presidents, just because when they're sending stuff into the system, it's not always done so with the understanding that that would be shared. So I just need to double check to make sure to see what we can share there. But I will tell you that, we've had 4 institutions that actually decreased their fees, 6 did not, but they all offered a rationale as to what their costs were in the situation on their campuses. As many of you know, as COVID testing has continued, some money has also, been moved around because I know some schools are using athletic staff and students to help administer those COVID tests as well. So some costs you may not realize that are fixed costs or that have remained relatively high. But as far as specifics, that's why I would ask you to just shoot me an email. That way I can make sure that I'm not needing to put my foot in my mouth by saying something I shouldn't say, just because I do want to respect the presidents and the administrations with the information that we're sharing in a public setting, which this meeting is. But I'd be happy to continue this dialogue via email with the direction from our system office.
All right, thank you, Nate, as always. Moving on to Dan, Student Affairs.
Hi, everyone. As you know, a year ago around spring break, we all left our school and then our lives were never the same. And then we currently still live in all that difference of a time that it was. So because of that, the Student Affairs Committee, thanks to some guidance from the Executive Committee and other directors, we are interested in working on an event that will look into basically 1 year into a pandemic together, and it will take place in April. I know later today there's going to be some discussion about that. And then if you would like to help us with planning it, please come to our upcoming Student Affairs Committee meeting, February 21st, 2021 at 10 a.m. Eastern Time, depending on where you are. Of course, we included it because we wanted to make sure that was said. And you can also email April King at the email on that slide, Benjamin, who is the co-director with me, or myself, and we'll gladly send you the Zoom link to join in. April, did I forget anything?
I just want to reiterate that if whoever can come to the meeting can come, that'd be awesome. The more student voices we have, the better to get our point across.
Yes, and we also had the opportunity to talk to communications, and we were thinking to also do a video campaign alongside of this to just reiterate the fact that we all have gone through this, to reiterate that this is something that has happened and that we are all in this together. So if you would like to be part of that too, we'll send out more information later. That's all from us.
Thank you very much, Student Affairs, and thank you for letting COVID park in your lot. All right, DEI, moving on to diversity and inclusion.
Hi, I'm Tangela. So I'm just going to give you some of the updates. Reminder, we have a committee meeting February 19th at 5:30. Paige and I, we were talking yesterday, so we decided for the Title IX no contact order, we were going to make that a committee project. And lastly, we're looking into school groups for diversity and inclusion, and we decided to make that a committee project as well. And that's it for the updates.
Thank you, Tangela. One thing in the feedback survey that I mentioned earlier, that across the board, DEI was the most important committee to your schools. So if that's something that you feel is important, please make sure you're sending your people to the committee meetings so we can get some initiatives and some work underway on that.
Thank you, Laura.
No problem. All right, student fees.
Yeah, our next meeting is going to be next Tuesday at 7 p.m. I'll send out an email to people who have been coming. Good news, the student fee bill that we've been working on was submitted in both the House and the Senate. In the Senate, Senator Rosa Pep, and in the House, it's Delegate Ivey. We're very excited about this. It's going to be submitted, and there are going to be a quick amendment to some of the final language in both sides. And so once that is in there, Annie and I have already talked about getting USMSD support and lobbying for this bill. It's important to ensure that the money that is allocated for student fees goes to in which they are specified, and that the university can't just take it away and use it for whatever purpose they want, which is against USM policy. But obviously some schools ignored that policy, and therefore state law should be then required. So that's what's going on, and we'll talk more about it next Tuesday.
Thank you, Dan, and that is good news. All right, government relations.
Good morning, everyone. How's everyone doing? So very quickly, we're working on several bills, and I'm happy to go over them with you offline. But just to make this very quick, since we last met, the MGA has started, and we are doing testimonies for several bills. So if you ever want to do a testimony, please get me in touch, or get in touch with me. Sorry. And we'd be happy to connect you on any bill that there's testimonies for. And then every Monday morning, there's a call with Andy Clark. Andy Clark he's our Vice Chancellor for Government Affairs, and he goes over the bills that are impacting USM and USM students. So that's a very informative call if you ever want to learn about USM positions. Our next meeting is today for government relations at 5 o'clock today. and our advocacy day with the USM Central, along with the USM Council for Staff and University Staff and University Faculty, is on the 17th, and we'll be sending out more information about that.
So possible.
If I may add,
You know
Laura,
what? Yeah, we can get
at our committee meeting, we'll kind of talk through advocacy day. So if anyone wanted to jump on the call just to kind of tell us exactly what you want to see there, that's pretty much a main topic of today's committee meeting, as well as the bills that were in bill hearings last week and moving forward.
Awesome. Thank you guys. And thank you for all your hard work.
Laura, can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
This is Zakia. I'm on my phone. I'm 2 or 3 different places. So just bear with me if my voice doesn't match and my name is lit up and all kind of craziness. I just wanted to ask quickly if Dan Alpert has the section he's talking about, or maybe just communicate with me offline so I can understand your statement that institutions are going against system policy. I want to understand what section you're talking about in particular. If you have it, that would be great. If you want to do this on the side, we can do that too.
Yeah, we can talk offline, so that way.
Great.
We can do the meeting thing. I'll email you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Next up, was that Niv? Did I hear you speaking? Go ahead.
That was me. I apologize for talking over you.
No worries.
Hi, on COM. So we are currently working on our student success stories, and we'll be posting them starting this week. As a reminder, I believe last week we sent an email about a social media request form. So please do fill that out to give exciting updates about what your respective SGAs and institutes have been up to. And as Dan mentioned, we'll be working with Student Affairs to create a video about the 1-year anniversary of COVID. I will send another email with information to join if you're interested in participating in the video. So email to follow with all the links. So thank you all for everybody who's been participating, and I hope everyone has a nice meeting.
Thank you very much. And yeah, just to piggyback on that, if you guys, if you would please share, everyone here is a student success in some way. If you could share your stories with NIV so we can help other students and recruiting for USMSC in the future. And that is it for our slideshow. Moving on to our next piece on the agenda is our guest speaker, President of University of Maryland. I'll let Bernetta introduce him.
Oh, thanks, Laura. Zakia, do we have our guest speaker?
He's not yet.
Not yet. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we've let him in he hasn't shown up in the waiting room yet.
Okay.
Laura and Bernetta, with your permission, maybe I can make just a couple of announcements while we're waiting for Dr. Fowler.
Yes, we haven't heard from our advisors yet, so. Perfect.
I wanted to let you all know that all of our campuses are doing much more aggressive testing this spring, as many of you have recognized clearly already. And this is really necessary given the increase in frequency about that. That's one thing. We've had our budget hearing, and for the first time in the 8.5 years that I've been involved with USM, the Department of Legislative Services did not recommend an additional cut from the governor's budget. So I think although we're seriously down from last year because of all the costs and so on, the governor's office and the legislature are recognizing that and being as good as they can be, I think, is one way to put it. One more thing that I would just like to let you know, we don't have all of the details yet, but in fact, I'm working with the State Health Department to create or to engage in a website where students from across the system can volunteer at vaccination sites, especially at mass vaccination sites. They are going to literally need hundreds of volunteers to make this work. We are in this for the long haul, and there are many things that our students could do to help make those vaccination sites successful. So keep your eyes out. We will be sharing that with all you student leaders and so on, and getting emails out to the campus, I'm going to say within the next week or so. And I hope that, I know you all are terribly busy, but hopefully you will encourage some of your friends and colleagues to engage in this. As has been said by the leaders here, we are in this together. And I think our students could be extremely helpful to the overall cause in getting the population vaccinated. So those were my main announcements for today. And I see that Dr. Fowler has joined us.
He has. Okay, so just a quick reminder to everyone that our meeting is live streamed and recorded today. I'm actually excited with our new timeline, our new time format. We're sticking to it so far. So next up, as y'all are aware, we have a guest speaker with us today. It gives me great pleasure to introduce UMGC's president, who I had the honor of first meeting during UMGC's presidential search. So I want to congratulate him again and welcome Dr. Gregory Fowler today.
Well, thank you, Bernetta. And I will start by saying thank you all for the invitation to come join you for this wonderful Super Bowl Sunday morning. It's a little bit snowy out there, but I hope everybody will be safe as they travel around. And certainly thank you for the invitation. I very much appreciate and love any opportunity I can get to share time, particularly here at the Student Voice, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move forward. My mom gave me a saying when I was young, and that was, Greg, you have 2 ears, 2 eyes, and 1 mouth for a reason. And so I'm going to just give you a couple of thoughts, but I really want to open up and make sure I answer whatever questions and concerns or thoughts that you might have, so that I can learn a little bit more about what's on your mind. So that's really hopefully the goal of the day. It's always a little unusual to come into this setting and not exactly know what might be in your mind. So we'll hopefully turn this into a dialogue. With that in mind, let me start also by saying, I think one of the things that most of you will say is that if you had anticipated a year ago what your experience would be, it would not have been this. And I want to definitely acknowledge that for a lot of you, the experience that you have had is very different than the one you thought you were going to have when you were envisioning your college experience. Having said that, I hope that a lot of the things that we've done within the system have made that experience still productive and something that will allow you to continue moving forward in a lot of the ways that you want to achieve the goals and dreams that you have in your lives. I won't spend a lot of time talking about my background. I think most of you, if you wanted to hear about me, could have read about that. But I will tell you that I've spent the last decade and a half of my life working to try to make sure that the online experiences that we put students in are the ones that actually meet the needs that they have moving forward. If you see me from time to time looking over to here, I did get your invite, so I tried to lay out a couple of bullets of here's what they said. So I'm looking at the notes or the questions you gave and trying to make sure I take care of a couple of those things. About 16 years ago, I got an invitation. I was a professor at Penn State at the time to go build a college out in Salt Lake City called Western Governors University. That college was started by 2 governors, one from Colorado, Roy Romer, and one from Utah, Mike Leavitt, who had heard from a lot of the businesses in their state that the students who were graduating from college didn't have a really good sense of the skills they needed and weren't able to demonstrate those skills in a way that made the businesses comfortable. So they tried to build a new model, and that model was an online institution that I spent the next 6 years of my life trying to help build up. And then I moved, of course, over to Southern New Hampshire University, and I suspect a number of you have seen the bus commercials there. And the work that I've done there was exactly the same type of thing. It was beginning to build this online side of the house. SNHU is actually not quite 100, about 90-year-old school. It has a residential campus. If you were on it, you'd think it was your typical New England leafy campus that you see in a lot of the movies. But it also has a very, very large online campus as well. There are about 5,000 students on the ground campus, and give or take about 140,000 in the online space. So between them, the 2 schools that I spent the last decade and a half building up are probably 2 of the largest schools in America, but both have very large online presences. The other thing that I've done with my time is for the last several years, I've been on the New England Commission for Higher Education. Every school has to get accredited by a regional accreditor if they're going to distribute federal funds. And New England is the home of a lot of schools that you probably have heard of before. They house everybody from the Ivy League schools like Harvard, Yale, Dartmouth, Brown, to system schools like the University of Massachusetts, to community colleges. So lots of schools up there. And as a commissioner, our job was to make sure that those schools were in compliance with the various standards, whether they were governance standards or student life or academic affairs or academic programs that the government wants to make sure are happening. But they are all very different types of schools. And just like the system here in Maryland, what you'll find is that you have different schools that operate with somewhat similar types of learning experiences, but also very strong missions that may be tied to more than just that. So everything from state schools that are focused on research to the HBCUs are schools that are trying to make sure that they serve the mission that they have moving forward. At the best, online experiences have a lot to offer. And this is coming from someone who spent a lot of time trying to figure out, what do these things look like? When they are done well, they can be done in ways that allow for faculty to have insights into which students are struggling more than they would have been before. They're allowed to see things like, this student's answered this question 3 times, seems to be struggling in this area, and appoint different types of support resources that will allow those students to be successful. It allows you to create experiences where the students can control more of what's actually happening and when it's happening, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, whether it's the learning communities that they have, or some of the discussion posts that they're trying to work with, or just-in-time resources that may vary from person to person. Those are important things to think about, and those things also allow for voices in the online experience to have voices that are heard that might not have been heard before. And this is one of the things I really have been very proud of over the years, is to see and hear new voices join the conversation that might not have been a part of it before. So I often say to my teams, who knows where the next Beethoven or Mozart or Helen Keller or others may be coming from? Online opportunities give voice to people who might not otherwise have had it when they're done well. But to do that requires new skills and infrastructures. And in a lot of cases, what you've been experiencing is the coming of age conversations that your institutions have been having and trying to figure that out. What does this need to look like if we are going to do this well? And it does require a lot of planning and development and things that you want to think about. The best example I can have is look at your smartphone. The smartphone is a device that originally was doing something that a hardline phone that was plugged into your wall could do very simply. But it does so much more now. In fact, one of the things I suspect that you use it very little for is actually making phone calls. But think about all the infrastructure behind this thing actually working. Think about what you have to do to make that work. Whether it is the Wi-Fi networks, whether it's the towers you have to build, whether it's support systems and development of the skills you have to think about. All of that has to go into thinking about the same types of things for a learning experience. And over the years, we spent time thinking about, what does it mean to see students who are struggling these ways? How do we help them when they're at a distance? When you're having different voices who are coming into the conversation, how might that play out? What does that look like? And how do we make sure those voices are included in the conversation? How do you reach all those voices and allow them to empower their lives? So I've seen this at work with refugees in Africa, homeless kids in Los Angeles, inner city students. There are ways to do it, but it's a very deliberate process. And it's a learning experience. A lot of this will be about, how do we learn to do this work well? It's also not the same learning experience for everybody. It will be different for different audiences. UMGC has a very large online adult population who's there for some very specific reasons. I suspect those reasons aren't quite the same as the coming of age experience that a lot of you were thinking of at the 18 to 22-year-old point. A lot of the people who are at UMGC will say that they're 30 to 40 years old. They've had all the coming of age experiences they ever want to have in their lives. That's a different thing for them, and that's fine. This isn't a either or game. It really is a both and game. How do we help all the various populations get the learning experiences that they need for what they need to do to move forward? So, and recognizing that that's going to be different is a little bit of a shift for higher education. Many of you have probably a very fixed notion of, here's what higher ed is. And Truth Higher Ed meets different people in different ways. And that's going to continue to be the case as we continue to move forward. I'm a big movie buff. And one of the movies that I refer to a lot when I'm talking about learning experiences is the movie The Karate Kid. Something that may be before a lot of you were born, the original version of back in the early 1980s, though you may be watching Cobra Kai, which is a pretty good show, by the way. If you watch that show, the premise of it is this. A learner, a person needs to gain a new skill set, but they don't have the resources to do it in the traditional way and probably aren't very good in working in that way in the first place. Daniel LaRusso, he's got to learn karate. In learning karate, skill set that has some very clear standards, he meets a teacher who can help him, but does not have a traditional dojo, does not have a traditional space for him learning, doesn't have a conventional way to do it. But he finds a way through his connection with Daniel LaRusso to give him the skills that he needs. At the end, he's still got to meet the same assessment that everybody else does. The tournament he's in does not make exceptions for how you actually got the skills that you got. You either are in or you're not, that the assessment has to be the same. But the way they go about getting those skill sets will differ from person to person. This is what online experiences are trying to learn. How do we help the 18 to 22-year-old? How do we help the 50-year-old who needs a different type of job? How do we think about, giving them what they need rather than the only thing that we believe we have to offer on the table? So some of our students are coming in, they don't need 4 years degrees. Some of them are coming in for skill sets that may be a very different type of thing. And we need to work on things like those micro-credentials, others. And we certainly are doing that work. I think we want to make sure at the same time we are listening to the voices of the students who you are leading as part of that conversation as well. That's going to be one of the biggest things I think that we want to be talking about. So how do we make sure that happens? How do we work with our sister institutions within the system to make sure that those schools who were not originally focused on online learning is one of the things we're spending some time behind the scenes doing. So we are talking to faculty across all of the various institutions. We are working with different types of learning resources that we're making available to help them get a better sense of when students struggle, what are the things that work? How are the different ways that you want to approach these types of things? So that conversation is happening. What can you do as leaders about this? I think one of the big things is making sure your voice is heard by all of the various populations that are trying to help you do this type of work. This more now than ever is one of those experiences where people are trying to figure out what is working and what is the feedback for the various groups we're trying to help move forward in various things. There's a phrase called VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, that the military often uses. You begin to hear it more now in just day-to-day settings. That term applies very much to higher education right now. Things are in a sort of state of transition. A lot of it is uncertain. It's not always quite sure, are we going to be back on campus? If we are going to be back on campus, are there going to be sports? Can we actually have more than one person in a dorm? All of these are things that we are sorting our way through. At the same time, we're trying to say, how do we make sure the learning experiences we have give the students what they need? And to do that, we need to make sure those voices are part of the conversation. But we also need to make sure that you as leaders ensure that the other voices who might not otherwise be heard are heard. One of the opportunities with online education is certainly it provides more opportunity, but it also increases likelihood in some cases that DEI issues are going to come to the forefront, whether it is through cyberbullying, whether it is through lack of access to technology. I mean, all of these things that we are thinking about are part of the conversations that I hope you make the space to be a part of that conversation, because it's your job to make sure those voices are heard and that we are thinking about them as we move forward. Just as there's lots of opportunity to open up to new populations, there's also the danger of, making sure that people are not shut out of the conversation because of either class or race or any of the other things that DEI is very much concerned about. And you've got to play a big role in making sure those voices are heard as part of that. This is the slowest things are ever going to be in your life. That is a strange statement for people to hear, but things are only going to get faster from here. They are only going to continue to change. The new normal will not be the old normal. And one of the things that I would say about online education is that this is an opportunity for you to engage and immerse yourself in the technologies and the approaches and the populations that you're going to be engaged with for the rest of your lives. It might be happening in ways that you weren't necessarily anticipating. It might be happening at a speed that you weren't quite ready for. But these are the ways, if anything, we need to make sure you are more comfortable with these technologies and these skills. I know that Zoom has its issues. I know that a lot of the various technologies that you are in have their issues, but people are working on those things. And just like if you saw the early versions of smartphones, flip phones, and before that, just pagers and beepers and all of those types of things, you know that this technology will continue to evolve, and it will only get more complex. And people will figure out more and more how to use it and how to make it accessible to people. An example that I use is, I don't know how many of you know the name Sean Fannin, but I guarantee you are a sort of an inheritor of a lot of the work that he did. Sean Fannin founded the company Napster, which was the sort of precursor to a lot of the things that you are now using when you're talking about Spotify and Pandora and all of these types of things. When it first came out, the music industry was furious. I mean, they sued him. That's actually what happened with Napster. They sued him around 1999, 2000. Napster got shut down. But remember with Napster, what you found was this guy created this experience that was different from the status quo. Before then, if you really wanted to listen to music, you had to listen to music in the ways the music industry told you to listen to it. You had to buy a CD or something. It was a packaged experience. And it was $15.99 unless you got a sale on it. Tower Records, nobody knows Tower Records anymore. Blockbuster Music, Circuit City, all these names of places that made their fortunes on this type of thing. Back then it was $15.99, and you might only like 2 songs on that CD, but you got to buy the whole thing. And then this guy comes along and says, I'm going to create a different type of experience. I'm going to give people the ability to actually do the things that they want. They can get the songs that they want, and they can create the playlist that they want. The music wasn't quite as good when it first started off. It just wasn't. It was a trial and error. If you got the early MP3s and other things, the music wasn't quite as nice, but people were working on that technology behind the scenes, and they were making different iterations of it. And sure, Sean Fannin got shut down, but within 2 years, you knew that genie wasn't going to go back into the bottle. And within a couple of years, you had iTunes, and then iTunes turned into streaming music and video. And look at all the businesses that have gone out of business because of the changes that technology has made as a result of that. There are no Tower Records anymore. Think about Kodak. This thing put Kodak out of business because Kodak wasn't thinking about what was going to come next. Now, of course, with the streaming music, you get to basically make your own CDs, your own playlists. I can make a different one for going to the gym than I can for that trip that I'm going to take across country, than I am for the people who are going to come to the Super Bowl party. If I were having one, which I'm not because we're social distancing, but if I were having one, there'd be a playlist. And all of these things are happening because there are new opportunities that have developed over time. That's happening with learning experiences too, for all the different populations that we're talking about. People who are saying, I may or may not have a 4-year degree, but I need to get a new skill set. I may or may not necessarily want to do all of this stuff at 9 o'clock in the morning with that class, but I want new opportunities. So the ability to take things and move them in different ways to engage is part of what that learning experience is all about. And the way that's going to happen is making sure your voices are part of that conversation as that gets shaped. And again, making sure that the voices who aren't in this room, the people who aren't used to being heard, are part of that conversation as we continue to move forward as well. So I like I said, didn't want to talk too long, but just wanted sort of to let you know, this is sort of where I see things at right now, and where I think the industry is going to go when I talk about higher education. I don't think it's going to, now that, again, I want to frame that with, that doesn't mean the other experiences don't still exist as well for people who want to have them. There is still always going to be an 18 to 22-year-old residential coming of age experience because that serves a purpose. Just like I think that I graduated from Morehouse College, HBCUs serve a huge purpose. We need to make sure we see the various purposes and not try to replace one with the other, assume that they can't exist at the same time. Those things are going to be true across the board. They have value. One of the things that NETI helped us understand as we were looking at the various institutions is these institutions are valuable not because they're all alike, but in fact, because they're different and they help different people do the things that they need to do to meet the dreams that they have with their lives and change the destinies of their families and communities as a result of that. So this is not a poster for everybody should go online. That's not true. I suspect that a lot of you will find that the things you want to do, the experiences you want to have, are more conducive to other types of experiences. And that's great. That's exactly one of the things that we want to make sure is part of the conversation as well. So as we come out of the pandemic, it doesn't mean that we're going to go back to the way things were, but it also doesn't mean that everything is going to be the way things are right now. I think that somewhere in the middle, you will find these various opportunities for us to say, how do we learn and create new experiences that may be a mixture of the old and the new as we move forward, and also provide opportunities for different populations as a result. So with that, I hope I haven't talked your ear off, but did want to give you a little bit of thought I hope I responded to most of your questions here. But now I'm opening the floor up to whatever you have that you want to talk about.
Thank you, Dr. Fowler. So yeah, y'all have some questions. Let's have at it.
Well, I guess I'll ask a question. First, thank you, Dr. Fowler, for your insight, for your knowledge. I'm so glad that we have someone who's very, very experienced in terms of online learning, especially at a time like this within the system. You touched on it a little bit, but I think the background of a lot of schools and the history and the goals are focused not solely, but mostly on that on-campus, in-person residential experience. Do you think that, and as they're growing, that online learning is going to have to become more normalized and more focused on in terms of a primary focus, or do you think that universities are going to have to continue with what they're doing already?
So I do think, and thanks for the question, David. I do think there are tools and practices that will come out of what we have seen that will change the way that even the residential experience happens. And you see this happening across various types of things that are happening, not just in higher education. One of the big questions that a lot of people have, I spent a lot of time in Manhattan, and all these people have been working from home. And if you've been to Manhattan, you know that a huge portion of the buildings downtown are office buildings that people are all starting to say, wait a minute, we can do this in a different way. Why do we have all these people coming into this office space when they can do this stuff from home? And they are being at least as productive. What that may mean is that some people may come into the office on various days, but not necessarily every day. In other words, they're taking the tools and the resources and the learnings from this period, and they're integrating them into the reality of what are the various types of populations we are trying to serve. So I think that there are a lot of faculty members and a lot of institutions that have taken this moment to say, let's take a step back and think about what we're trying to accomplish. Are we accomplishing those things the best way? And are there new ways that we might go about doing those things and integrating those things into the classroom? And at the same time saying, but there's great value as well in the things that we are doing in a lot of the places across our residential campuses, our community college, commuter campuses, all these types of different experiences. So I do think it's going to be, it's a different use of the word, but a hybrid experience of learning coming across the board. So you will see teachers who are far more comfortable now with learning resources that may be digital. You will see them finding new ways to approach things like equity issues. But you'll also see them still continuing to do the great work that they're doing in the face-to-face environment. It may in some ways create more agility and scalability, but I do think the other pieces will be a part of that conversation going forward as well. So don't be surprised at that type of change over time. Not for everybody, but for a substantial portion of the education community, there is a conversation going on how do we get better at helping these students do the work that they're trying to do. There's always, of course, also a bit of a digital gap. And I've always been fascinated with the fact that the nature of technology is that the younger generation is always going to be better at it than the older generation. When I was growing up, I was very proud of the fact that I could figure out how to put together a VCR and program it. My parents didn't know what was going on. I am totally fascinated by the fact that my 5-year-old niece goes up to the TV screen and keeps trying to swipe it because she's so used to seeing those types of technologies and going, it's like just almost natively. It is, you've probably heard this phrase of a digital native. That plays out in the classroom as well. I mean, think about it. In a lot of instances, when we're talking about these technologies, you are far more familiar with them than your instructors are going to be. How does that change the nature of the classroom? How does that change the relationship between teacher and student? These are questions that a lot of institutions are trying to think about. And a lot of people are trying to get up to speed very fast on. So don't be surprised if you see that. We've often said in education that this is a journey of partners, that we are all learning together. That's never been more true than right now. I encourage you to give your teachers a little bit of a break on the fact that they haven't quite figured out yet how Slack is going to impact the classroom, but they'll get there. And in the meantime, give them the feedback that they need to help you succeed in the process.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
I have a question. This is Ashley from UMGC. So if workplaces, do you think the likeliness of workplaces being remote makes more sense for universities to work and maintain like a remote environment so that it's an easier transition to get jobs in the future?
I certainly,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Ashley, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that was it.
Yeah, I certainly think that skill set is one that will become more and more important within the space. So when we're talking about, there's a book by a guy, Joseph Aoun, he's the president of Northeastern in Boston. It's called Robot Proof. And it's all about these enduring skills that we continue to talk about. It is true that we have more automation and more technology now than ever before. And there are things that computers will replace humans and get better at doing, but computers will never be the human factor. The example I've been using recently is, it is probably true that over the next couple of years, computers will get better than humans at being able to diagnose very quickly whether or not you have cancer. But nobody wants to hear from a computer that they have cancer. That's a skill set that is uniquely human. And these types of skills will make the workplace become more important within the workplace. So if we're going to work at a distance, how do we engage in effective communication at a distance? How do we engage in dealing with hard conversations or critical thinking or the other pieces at a distance? So the more we can immerse our students in those types of environments, the better off they're going to be. I remember, I doubt I'll get through this without quoting at least 2 or 3 more movies. Forrest Gump was a revolutionary period piece for a lot of people, because all of a sudden you had this guy immersed in historical events in a way that looked real to people. Think about how dated that technology is now. I mean, in a time where we are talking about alternative facts and virtual realities and the ability to dub voices over other voices or place people in places where they weren't before, the skill set of navigating what is real and what is not is one that we're going to need our students to be able to have. And that goes back to the more we can immerse you in that type of thing. It's funny because research in the past was go to the card catalog, get a whole bunch of data and a whole bunch of facts, and you write your own papers. And now you've got to be able to discern, it looks like he said that. I can literally, it is no longer true that seeing is believing, because all of these things require a different type of skill. So I think the more, to your question, we can engage people in practicing those things in ways that allow them to navigate the virtual space, the more we make that a critical skill set that we are building in, the more important that's going to be for being able to operate in a world where you may or may not ever see your coworkers face to face again.
Thank you.
Sure.
It looks like Matt has a question in the chat. Or did you just have some feedback, Matt?
Oh, it was just a question. I've noticed that other colleges and I'm as a graduate student at UMGC, I've loved it. I had a great experience. The teachers have been very understanding with troubles and things that happened during the pandemic, very flexible. And I think it's because they are positioned to work with non-traditional students. So I guess my question was, have other universities and colleges reached out to University of Maryland Global Campus for advice to try to get that way of, to kind of take on our way of thinking with it, with the virtual aspect?
Yes, yes. And it's one of the things that we have a lot of conversations about. And one of the benefits of being in a system is being able to say, so if you're using these tools, what works in these types of situations? Or I've got a student who's struggling with this. What are the support tools that you would put in place as a result of that? Or how do you change dealing with some of the various types of experiences that you would normally have face to face and still be effective in this type of work that students are going to have to get done. So we are having lots of conversations, certainly within the system, but also even just across the country. I mean, there is a huge, the vast majority of schools in America were not preparing to go online, and certainly not preparing to go online in a very short period of time when this hit. So everyone's trying to figure this out. So yes, we have certainly conversations internal to the system, but we also have lots of people across the country saying, can you help us understand the best ways to do this, and how are we going to evolve over time? There are tools that people just hadn't thought about. I mean, it's funny. I mean, Zoom was not something that people were thinking of a year and a half ago. But there are also other opportunities that you have to deal with. How might you do science labs, for example, in this environment? While the pandemic has in a lot of ways frozen us in our homes, it has not frozen time. And time continues to move forward for all of us. So for those who are trying to pursue their dreams and goals in education, we've had to spend a lot of time talking to people about, here are tools you might not have thought of, but are out there in the industry that will help you do these types of things. Or here are different ways to do the things that you're dealing with. Think about, for example, you now have telehealth in a way that you did not have a short period of time. Telecounseling in a way that you did not have maybe a year and a half ago. People weren't even thinking about these types of things. And now, just like higher ed, medicine and everything else will never be the same. So people are trying to figure out, and there are a lot more ways to do these things than people think. And our job is to make sure we're part of the conversation and let them know the places where we have utilized tools that were successful, but also to make sure we don't go down every bright, shiny object pathway for that. So we're trying to make sure we innovate, that we continue to stay at the front of the game when it comes to helping our students be successful wherever they are. And that will vary again from student to student, but at the same time, helping our colleagues figure out this whole thing. So it is one of those we're trying to move the whole industry forward in a conversation that they were just not prepared to have 18 months ago, but are very rapidly getting up to speed on.
All right. Well, we have approached the top of the hour. So I don't think there's any other questions out there. If you have some other ones, feel free to reach out to us in the chat or via email. We don't want to keep you too long, Dr. Fowler. I'm sure you have other things to do today. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you again for the invite. Yes, I've got to go figure out how to bake wings in a way from scratch with this recipe that my mother gave me. So I'm going to see if it's going to serve well. It's just me, but I'm going to try them. So we'll see. In the meantime, thank you all for, again, the invite. And this will be an interesting and amazing time if we can find ways to continue to build these types of partnerships and make sure your voice is heard. But I close again with that last statement, that the thing that I have always been most concerned about in this process has been, are we, in our attempts to try to create more accessibility, actually decreasing accessibility? Technology is not something that everybody has access to. And if we create experiences that we feel like are going to be scalable, how do we also make sure we take the time and invest in those communities where everybody may not have a laptop or Wi-Fi? And if we're going to be online, how do we make sure that those voices are heard? Because they're the ones who are going to be the most scared. And you're the student leaders who have the ability to think about them, even when they don't raise their voices, to say, have we really included all of the people who need us to be thinking about them, because they may not be comfortable doing so, and we don't want them to fall further behind. So thank you for the work you are doing. Please keep doing it. And if there's anything I can do to help with that, more than willing anytime to be a part of the conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Everybody have a good Sunday. Try to stay warm out there.
You too.
Thank you.
All right, Laura, I think you have the agenda still rolling up there, right?
It's noon and it's time for a break. Oh, it's 12:04. So, you know, we deserve 10 minutes. So everyone back at 12:15.
Bernetta.
Yep.
I think everybody owes you another very big thank you for your work on the search committee to find Greg Fowler.
Thanks, Joe. It was a team, and yeah, a lot of folks were involved, so yeah, I think we're very pleased.
Yeah, good. Well, you should be.
All right, Laura, you ready?
Yeah. All right, 12:16. Moving on. How to testify at the Maryland General Assembly.
So I can take the lead on that. Let me go ahead and share my screen. And by the way, there is an attached document that you guys can follow on, but I can go ahead and just give you a live way of show you how to do it. So this is the main page of the MGA website. It's mgaleg.maryland.gov/MGA website, the homepage. And if you want to sign up to testify, you click on this little icon on the right. It says My MGA. This icon on the right, it's My MGA. Click on that. Now I'm already signed in, so I'm gonna try to sign out of here. So when you click on the My MGA, you come to this login page. Now I already have an account, so if this is your first time coming onto this page, you would click on the Create a My MGA tracking account. Click on that. You put in your first name, your last name, your email, all of the information that is required, and you click on Register. After you do that, you can go ahead and sign in with that email. So I'm going to go ahead and sign in. And once you do that, you click on Witness Sign Up. Right here, Witness Sign Up. And then you're able to search through the committee, whichever committee you want to sign up to testify on. You can search that. You can filter it through committee. Let's say that I want to testify on, the Capitol Military Department bill. I would click on that. And after doing that, I would type in whatever organization that I'm representing, what my position is, whether it's favorable with amendments, so on and so forth, and then what the testimony is. So if you're providing oral testimony or written testimony. If you're providing written testimony, then you would obviously need to upload that written testimony, and you would click on the upload file and upload the document. And then very importantly, once you're done that, you would click on the save button, and then that should be it. Are there any questions? So one thing I do want to clarify though is the way the MGA is working this session, because everything is online, you can only sign up to testify 48 hours before the testimony. So if the hearing is, let's say, on 11 o'clock Thursday, then you must sign up on Monday. And even on Monday, there is a specific time frame that you have to sign up on, and that's between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. So Monday through Friday, the application is on between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. and you have to sign up 48 hours before the hearing.
Arsalan, may I jump in? May I jump in? It's Yvonne. To reiterate about the 48 hours, it's actually 2 business days, just so we don't get confused that, 48 hours is every 7 days of the week. So if the bill hearing is on Tuesday, you need to sign up by Friday. That way, that it'll count as that Friday, that Monday, and then Tuesday is the bill hearing.
And Arsalan, this is Joe Balkman. One of the things I think people also need to know, the written testimony can be especially critical because anybody who gives oral testimony, you are limited to 2 minutes. And they will shut you down after 2 minutes. Middle of sentence, you stop. So writing your testimony out and submitting it as written, and then just giving the essence of the messages is really critical.
It is, yes, and something that I kind of put out at the beginning of the council meeting today is if you guys need any help with creating or crafting your testimony, then always feel free to talk to Bernetta or someone on our government relations committee team. Would be more than happy to help you with that as well.
May I also
One
add
quick
one
question.
may I add one other thing just about the testimony? As far as signing up, and if you just say you sign up and you want to do an oral testimony, however, they don't select you, I would always, like Joe said, write a written one, because they don't select everyone. They'll send you an email and say whether you were selected or not. And so in our favor the other day, we did have a few people that were selected. However, we did have a few people who were not selected that were probably, their testimonies probably would have been excellent points for our bills. So just make sure that you are prepared both ways. And written testimony, they will pretty much take as many, but they won't allot within that 50, and favorable will be 25, and then opposing would be another 25 to equal out to be 50 per session bill hearing.
To clarify, Yvonne,
So just
that's on.
three quick things I wanted to mention. I think the part about, I don't think we knew there was a selection that would be made right prior to or
Right.
to recently. So that's really good to know. Is there any specific criteria about how selections are made?
So Bernadette, to clarify, selection is made in the House. So for the House, the way the selection works is there's, as Yvonne said, a 25-person limit. So only 25 folks can sign up, and once that 25-person signs up, then there's no more signing up after that. On the Senate side, it works a little bit differently. So there can only be 4 proponents, 4 opponents, and 2 proponents with amendments. And anyone after that is randomized. So let's say the sponsor of the bill brings in 4 folks as the proponents. Then the 2 proponents with amendments are going to be randomized. Anyone that signed up for the Senate can be chosen to kind of be chosen in that selection process. So it works a little bit differently on both sides, depending on which house you're testifying on. So just keep that in mind as well.
Looks like Dan has a question.
So given all that, and thank you, Aslan and Yvonne, what are you two doing and USMSC doing to coordinate responses that were as effective as possible in our lobbying efforts?
Yeah, so when it comes to testimony, we're making sure that we're touching base with folks that we know can have the best impact or the most impact. So of course, Amy and the VP's response is of course the most, I guess, heavy in the sense that they hold a certain position. So we always try to have their voice on our testimonies, and it depends from bill to bill. I know in the past, in the previous bill, in regards to the student military and voter empowerment bill, we made sure that we reach out to a few constituents of a few of the senators' districts. We made sure that we strategize on who to reach and who to testify for. So we obviously try to do that on our end as well. But if anyone does want to testify, and if they especially have their own story or if their own experience, we always try to incorporate that in as well.
So are you all going to be telling specific institutions or people to testify in order to make sure that whatever we support as a council is lobbied for strongly, or is
Exactly.
it just, okay?
No, it's not like a anyone, everyone kind of thing. It's strategic in the people that we reach out to, of course, and the institutions that we reach out to.
I'm not sure if I've been multitasking, so I might have missed it if you mentioned this during walking through it. But one thing that I learned this week was that if you're submitting written testimony, you have to do it during that window as well. I tried to, I signed up for oral and I didn't get picked. So I tried to submit written and it wouldn't let you. So you have to have your written prepared as well as a backup.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Laura.
Yeah, I think that's all there. But if you have any questions, I'm trying to look at the chat. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Is there anything else, Yvonne, Bernetta?
I'll just add that one point. I know you mentioned if folks had other questions or concerns about just how to give the testimony or prep, they can reach out So I'll be standing by, you know, if y'all need to, if you've never done this before and you need some assistance or someone to just kind of practice with, let us know and we'll schedule something and go over it with you, okay?
And if I can add to that, actually, at least I know for the one bill, the textbook bill 792 that has its hearing date on Thursday, if anybody's interested in signing up to provide written or oral testimony for that, I've actually been working closely with Patrick and Dr. MJ Bishop in the Kerwin Center, and Dr. Bishop has agreed to look over anyone's testimony if we can get it received in advance. So if anyone wants to testify on that bill, feel free to send it to me and I will forward it her way if you want eyes within the system as well. And so Joe's office does great things is the moral of that story, but thank you.
Thanks, Nate.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so next on our agenda is the State of the Shared Governance Survey. Sakia, you wanna take a moment?
1 second, let me stop multitasking. Wait a minute. Okay, can you all hear me? Okay, we mentioned this during the last meeting, and Annie, Bernetta, and Laura have had a chance to go over it. This is the State of Shared Governance report, which each of the shared governance councils, so that for staff, students, and faculty, complete a different report with the same goal of trying to get the stakeholders' views on the state of shared governance at your institution. So within the next week or so, we just got to do a little bit more finalizing and probably put this up on a digital tool so you aren't completing a survey in Word. You'll see, I'm trying to share my screen 1 second. You'll get a survey that covers a few topics. I'm just going to kind of go over it quickly so we don't spend too much time. And maybe even I'll send it out for you to take a look at and you can have a day or two to give any feedback. But we just start off with the purpose of the survey, definition of shared governance, just in case anyone is not sure. It is, though, the process by which faculty, staff, students, administration, governance boards are participants in the decision-making and policy setting at institutions. The links here are a definition from SUNY, the State University of New York system, and then reference to the USM shared governance policy, which needs updating, but the content there is still pertinent because it gives you an idea of where students may be looking to or by policy have the option to have a voice, usually through your shared governance council. So we open with just some demographics. Who are you representing? It's important that when you tell us who is involved in completing the survey, we need to know that. Is it your executive board? Is it just the president? Is it just the vice president? We're hoping that you can make this, your responses, that is, as representative as possible. So although it's probably too much to, get the ideas from all of the students on your campus, the extent to which you can make it your executive board or some broader segment of the student government is probably going to be most representative as opposed to one person. Then we're asking you about your general satisfaction. There are a lot of opportunities here for you to elaborate on your answers and to explain why you disagree with something. That context will help because as the executive team looks at this information, they're trying to pull out themes, be they positive and things that can be used as best practices or things that are concerning. So if you just tell us that the administration is not supportive, say you answered that one and said you strongly disagree and don't tell us why, that's not giving anyone, the system, your president, an opportunity to figure out how to make things better. So we do encourage you to, where there is an opportunity, to answer why you strongly disagree or disagree with the topic. We want to know your opinions about communication, that you are having the opportunity to be accessible to or meet with different members of the administration, that concerns are raised and that there are some steps to mitigate them, that you have some kind of a connection with your faculty, shared governance, all of that is here. And also that you understand that there's a process in place to carry issues raised by your student governments to senior administration. And then similar questions about your interactions with administration, decision-making. And then for graduate students only, we're wondering about your meet and confer process and the extent to which you're involved in that and are satisfied with how that's going. There's a section also for student fees, which we know is a topic we've already heard about a couple times today. And then we want your general summary. So ideally you take everything you just told us in the last few pages and summarize your feelings about the state of shared governance at your institution. The good, the bad, the ugly. We would like your summary there, no more than 3 paragraphs. If you think you've covered it all in your previous disagrees and strongly disagree comments, you can just say that. If you've been substantive there, you may not need to do a separate summary. So this is used for, again, to understand where you are in your thinking. It gets summarized, put into a report and sent to the chancellor. And the idea is that this goes to the chancellor in advance of his meetings, his annual reviews with the presidents. So again, I'll send this out for you to just take one look at it within a couple of days. Tell us if you have any questions, comments, concerns. We'll send out a link or however we're going to ask you to complete the survey. And then it will probably be due in early March. We want to get it in from you before spring break so that we can get the information to the chancellor late March, early April. So that's the general time frame. Look out for an email if you want to provide any feedback. But I think this year with Bernetta and Laura taking a look at it and having never gone through this process, I think we got some good feedback because they were completely new to it all. So hopefully we caught some things and explained some things that may not have been clear in the past. So we will send that out. If you have any questions now, I will happily try to answer them.
Zakia, I had a question. This is Nev speaking.
Yes.
So does it have to come one from each institute or will there be one from undergrad and one from grad SGAs?
Good question. You can decide. It's going to be, let me back up here, Niv, that's a good question. So we ask that each school regional center respond. If you have substantially different governance structures, some schools only have one, some schools have a university senate, it kind of differs all over the place. So you can decide if you have a completely distinct graduate and undergraduate student government and they function separately enough and differently enough that the experiences are different, then go ahead and fill out 2. You know, if all else fails and you're not sure, fill out 2. But if you find that your experiences are similar enough, then you can go ahead and fill out 1. But we do need to know who's answering the question. So right here is where you're going to tell us who your responses pertain to.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right, thank you. I'll send this out shortly and give you till Tuesday to give any feedback, and then we'll work on it as quickly as possible. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Zakia. Look forward to that. So real quick before we move into the general forum and campus report highlights, we're gonna try something different this week and do a live Zoom poll. Normally, Annie sends out an email where you guys put into a form the topics that are most important to you, and then we decide our breakout rooms based on how you voted on those topics. But this week this month we're gonna try to do the Zoom poll. So you guys, if you could look at the topics, the same topics we usually offer, and select the top 2 that are most important to you. You'll have multiple choices. So just pick the top 2 that are most important to you. And then when we break into our groups, it will be in those 2 topics. So it'll be topic based this month. So look out for that poll.
Working on it. 1 second.
Take your time. Just you guys fill it out when you see it. Okay, we're gonna move on. All right, so we do have some guests coming at 12:50 to talk about the grad employee experiences in the bill. So between now, we're gonna switch things around, do the town hall discussion with Dan, our co-director for student affairs. Oh, hey, there's the poll. And I'm going to share a screen. He has a collaborative document that we're going to take a look at. You guys see this okay?
Yes, it looks great. Thank you so much, Laura.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. So as I mentioned before, we're looking into doing some kind of a town hall or a community conversation around the topic of 1 year into a pandemic together. And the whole idea behind this is to get everybody together and have this discussion and to go over primarily 3 ideas. What was the impact of COVID on students? How did USM and institution respond? And then where do we go from here? Because I feel like everybody's wondering what's going to happen next. And with these 3 kind of topics, we thought we would be able to communicate the conversation that focuses on kind of seeing acknowledging what everybody went through, and then coming to a place where it says, here's where we're going forward, because we all know that this is likely not going to end in the next 2 months in a way. So then the questions for the panelists, that is yet to be determined because we do not exactly know who the panelists or who we want to invite to the conversation yet. I want to see what everybody thinks here today. And then the expected outcomes from the event are to acknowledge, the experience students have had throughout the past year and allow students to have a moment to feel recognized for the experience in the past year. And then lastly, this is something that was brought up recently, was to do a moment of silence at the beginning of the event to acknowledge all those who could not be with us due to COVID-19 now. And then there is some discussion about doing a marketing on it. Could you possibly maybe scroll down a little bit if it's okay? Thank you. And for the overall idea is to finalize the plan by March 10. So that way we can roll out posters and things like that, have it made in 5 days afterwards. We want to create a video campaign alongside the event that would acknowledge the student experience and promote the idea that we are all going through this again together and do our part of social distance, because we are doing our part of social distancing, participating in remote learning and, following CDC guidelines. And that's just the overall idea, but we want to see what everybody else thinks and what should the Student Affairs Committee take into account as we work on putting this together and what you all would see happen. I mean, if you hate it, we can change it up completely. It doesn't have to be this. We want to see how we can strengthen this and make it the best event it can be. I know April is also very excited to work on this as the committee chair, and we want to put it together well for all of you. And it will be, of course, virtual. I don't know if I mentioned that, but again, it's a virtual event, not an in-person event. So it's safe. Any questions, concerns, condolences, any comments?
Maybe we should ask everyone, how do you all feel about just a town hall event in general?
I definitely think a town hall is an excellent idea, just so you can try and understand what people are feeling, what people are going through. I'm definitely, we're definitely working on town halls here at SU, and doing it on a broader level will just give us a better sense of where we need to go and what we need to do in terms of preparing policy as well as ideas to move forward in the future. I guess a question for me would be that you touched on it at the beginning, but who would actually be speaking? Who would be the panelists or anything like that? Just so we can get a understanding on who's actually talking, and what the direction of the town hall would be.
So we didn't want to be just a small group who was going to decide on that. And that's why we wanted to leave it open to a greater conversation to see who you as the students would like to hear from. Because if you, the students, want to hear from specific people, then we can try to get those people there. But in case you feel like we've heard too much from other people and you want to take the seat and you want to have that conversation, we can try to work around a conversation that also incorporates a mix of students, panelists, and maybe professional panelists. Whatever everybody wants to see, that's what we will make happen. This is about all of you and all of us.
And can I make a suggestion too? When Daniel says who you want to hear from, you may not have specific names, but if you are thinking about topics, so someone who could speak on mental health, someone who could speak on whatever the issue is, so a counseling center person, a student affairs person, what are the topics, what are the issues, and even if you just start brainstorming those, we can figure out who that might be or who the expertise is if you don't have names in mind. Because, with 12 institutions, they're, experts and good people to talk about a lot of different things. So I would say think of it topic wise, if that helps.
So for example, if nobody has anything, we have already looked into some possible topical discussions. Would there be somebody who good that you all would like to hear from regarding the impact of COVID on students in like in a more broader sense from like the different institutions?
Have any of the institutions created maybe committees or anything dealing with COVID where somebody has been actively looking into this subject at a certain campus or another, and then maybe we could join up with them? I don't even know if that exists. So I had another question that I wanted to know from you guys. So on the to-do list says decide on date early April. So for town halls like this, like a big community thing where students come in and talk, what kind of day of the week is the best? Do students show up for you guys on Wednesdays, on Saturdays? Like what are you guys experiencing is the best day?
Laura, I had a question, but it was regarding your last statement where you were talking about if there's any committees. We have a committee at Towson. It's called the Return to TU Task Force, and it's more dedicated to just kind of watching COVID and how it's transforming and things like that, how the situation is moving in regards to how they want to bring students back onto campus. I don't know if that's something that kind of aligns to what you were asking. But that's one thing that I could think of if you would like the information of the head of it.
Absolutely. That's definitely a part of this conversation. We definitely.
Right. I can tell you that every campus does have at least one COVID committee that is looking across it. Some have subcommittees that are looking differently, but everybody has a COVID task force.
That's awesome. So if you guys if you have the information on these committees and task force, you can send the information to me or to Dan specifically. So at a minimum, we can get an invite and then also see if we can get participants and speakers from that pool.
Can I add something? Also, if you start thinking about this and you want to help us, we would love you to come to our upcoming committee meeting on February 21st and help us maybe develop this idea a little bit more, because we want to get as much student input as possible. And if we could get at least one student from every university to come, I mean, imagine the conversations that would happen. Imagine the planning capacity that we would have to kind of really put something good together. So if you all are interested, I know it's a lot to ask for you to kind of think about these things because, they're very broad and big asks, but if you can come to the meeting with some maybe ideas, we can flush them out and put it all together into a really, really good event and campaign that will be effective in outreach, and it will have good outcome when we put it together at the end.
This is Joe. The other thing I might suggest you at least think about, and I have no idea whether you want it to go this way or not, but we do have experts from across the system on COVID itself. We have people who are the head of the governor's task force. We have people on the CDC national task force. We have people who are plugged into the Biden transition team and so on. So if in fact you want expertise on COVID itself to be a part of this, we could find those folks too.
Joe, we will take that into account. Thank you so much for sharing, and we'll definitely come back with more information to you right after our committee meeting. Would that be okay?
That's fine. That's fine. I just wanted to make sure you all knew that we can tap into that kind of expertise if you wish.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing. Okay, so thank you very much, Dan, for talking about that. And hopefully we can move that conversation forward into some productive results soon. We have our two guest speakers here to talk about the graduate employee, student employee bill, and testimonies. I'm sorry, I'm multitasking. So you have Rachel and Autumn. Thanks for being here, you guys. You guys want to? I can't even see where you're at. Okay, there you are. Hi, guys. So if you guys don't know, or if you haven't been privy to this conversation, we've been talking a lot about the graduate student employee bill, and it's been proposed for about 10 years and it's never passed. And basically the bill would give graduate students the right to collectively bargain if they choose to. And it's somewhat controversial, but if we're going to take a stance and a vote on this as USMSC as a whole council, everyone kind of needs to understand what it is and the impacts that it has. So we've invited some guest speakers here to kind of help give some context and frame the conversation, so you know what we're talking about when we ask you to vote. Rachel, do you want to start us off?
Sure, I can do that. All right, hello everyone. Rachel Lamb. I'm finishing my 5th year of my PhD here at the University of Maryland, College Park. And for the last 2 years, prior to this one, I was the inaugural Vice President for Government Affairs at College Park. And so in that role, I got to participate in the System Student Council meetings and became familiar with sort of the longstanding fight, as you summarized, to help graduate students gain the right to collectively bargain. And it's been really great to be a part of that effort for the last couple of years to better understand the stories of graduate students and their diverse experiences, not just at College Park, but of course, across the system, and to help strategize ways that we can help improve working conditions for graduate students. I've been a graduate assistant myself for every year that every semester that I've been a graduate student, both as a TA and an RA. So I also understand it from that perspective. You probably talked a little bit about it before, but of course the current mechanism for trying to work out, any challenges that graduate students as a whole might be facing is meet and confer. And so, for example, at College Park and at UMBC and some other campuses, GAC, or the Graduate Assistant Advisory Council, is the mechanism for meet and confer. And that was basically established several years ago when graduate students sort of lost the right to collectively bargain. The alternative was this meet and confer process. So some of what this bill is getting at is that there are some challenges with this current meet and confer process. My understanding is that it works well at some schools, and that's great. At other schools, we face some challenges being able to best advocate for graduate students and their interests. And so what the bill does is gives an alternative option to this established meet and confer process. And it gives graduate students the right to collectively bargain again if they choose to. And that's really important because all the bill is doing is removing a specific clause that basically removing graduate students from a list of prohibited employee classes who cannot form a union or cannot collectively bargain. It's just removing that clause. And I think that this could be really helpful because it opens up more options for graduate students. No campus is required to collectively bargain. No campus will be forced to collectively bargain. And to be honest, there are so many steps between gaining the right and choosing to exercise that right that would require many, many more rounds of conversation and deliberation and voting for all graduate student bodies. So I also wanted to mention that sometimes it's hard. I'm glad there's several people who are here can share their stories, because I know sometimes it can be hard to understand why this would be so important, especially when your situation seems like things are going well for you. I personally have had a really great experience as a TA and a GA. I have a really great advisor, but I am so motivated to support this bill because I know that there are many other graduate students who I know personally and know across campus who've had some really challenging circumstances that have not been well addressed by the existing system. And so just advocating for them by making sure that future graduate students have the right to exercise the right to collectively bargain is worth it to me personally. So happy to answer any questions that you may have later, but maybe I'll just turn it over to Autumn and Tamara and Liberty and Jonathan.
Okay, do you want me to take over, Rachel?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Okay. Hi guys, I'm Autumn Perky. I'm a second-year PhD student at College Park. I'm in government and politics. I'm going to share some of my story and help contextualize for you guys like why this is so important. So we're just arguing for the right to collectively bargain. So I want to think about the bigger implications of what could be, down the road as we work through this. I came to a PhD program escaping from a situation of domestic violence. So this was really my chance to start over and bring my children somewhere else and find a safety. We come from Ohio. When I got here, something that I went through is I tried to find childcare. I applied for the, I think it's called the Maryland Scholarship now. They actually said because I was an RA and didn't have set work hours that I was ineligible for the scholarship. So they refused to give me the extra money to help offset childcare costs. So I took out a loan my first year of my PhD program to pay for childcare. Childcare for my son, who was 3 years old, cost around $12,000. And I want you to understand that coming into GBBT, we made a total of $17,500 was our start off stipend for the year. So I was actually living way beyond my means to try to start over. So one of the implications of collective bargaining down the road is we can't argue for like childcare subsidies. So that's a benefit for other people. And it's something we should be mindful of, even if you're just like two graduate student parents trying to survive in this area that is 35% higher in the cost of living than other areas. The other implication, and this is something I'm very passionate about, I've talked to the Diamondback about, is the idea of parental accommodations. And when we think about the FMLA leave, so the Family Medical Leave Act, that does not apply to graduate students because we are not employees, we are students. And why this is important is say you want to be a parent and you're thinking about this and you have another graduate student who you guys are in love or whatever, and you decide you want to have a kid. You only get guaranteed 6 weeks, and that's through College Park, and that has to be split between the two of you. Now, if you would be a woman and you would have a child, usually you need 5 weeks recovery time for a normal birth, 6 weeks minimum with a cesarean, a C-section, sorry. So that's not a lot of time. The Family Medical Leave Act actually guarantees employees 12 weeks of leave, and you get paid during that. And at certain points, it does get subsidized down, but that's a national level guarantee that employees have that students don't. And I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind when we're talking about collective bargaining, is that we don't have some of the same rights that actual employees would have. And that's most of my story, and I'm happy to answer most questions. I get very nervous, so thank you. I'll pass it over to Tamara, sorry.
Oh wow, it's my turn already? Oh, I just got here.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Tamara, and I am the psychology representative in the graduate student government at the University of Maryland. And I basically was, asked to come here and talk a little bit about why I support collective bargaining. I'm really new to this coalition, but I became really passionate very quickly for a couple of reasons. One, I've heard stories like Autumn's. I've heard really extreme stories of how not being considered an employee has really affected graduate students at the University of Maryland. But in addition to that, I think that some of the day-to-day policies affect your average graduate student, which is maybe what I consider myself. I don't have children, I don't have huge health problems that I need to deal with where, I'm being impacted significantly in really dramatic ways. But the day-to-day policies do affect me and they affect my constituents. Oh, yeah, I can actually explain what collective bargaining is right now. I actually recently put together some infographics that we shared on the Fearless Student Employees Instagram and Twitter accounts. So if you guys want to go look at those, we have some data on there, which are great. But I'll share right now. The definition of collective bargaining is the negotiation of a contract, including wages, benefits, and working conditions between employees and employers. So it's simply the right to come together, collect all of your employees, and then negotiate with your employer. Okay. And the rights that affords you is the ability to unionize. That's usually what people think of. But that means that you have the opportunity to negotiate salaries, to negotiate benefits, to negotiate working conditions. And these are all things that graduate students in Maryland don't have the right to do. And so this is when I say that I think that this affects the average graduate student, not just those that have these dramatic stories. They don't realize, or many graduate students don't realize the opportunities that they aren't afforded, right? Because we've become accustomed to the lifestyle we live and the rights that we do have. So I'll read through this list of things that are ways that this can affect the average graduate student. Like I said, you can't negotiate salaries. And so for students at the University of Maryland College Park, what this means is that we actually have the greatest cost of living deficit of any school in the Big Ten. So basically, if you are making the minimum amount for a stipend awarded by the University of Maryland, you make $16,000 less than is required for an average individual to live, one person in, the College Park, DMV area, right? And if you actually look at other non-unionized schools, do you see similar trends? Regardless of whether or not they're in rural areas or urban areas, it's very difficult when you're in a non-unionized school to make the average cost of living in order to just support yourself. Now imagine if you have children. Maybe you don't have to because you just heard Autumn's story. But in addition to that, the inability to negotiate benefits, this includes things like healthcare, childcare, etc. Also, the ability to negotiate workplace conditions, the way I always like to say is like, do you have access to the office supply closet in your department? Do you have a desk that you can work at? Do you have a place where you can safely work on campus, where you can leave your things? Those are things that, collective bargaining would allow us to argue for. But in addition to that, the ability to be protected from abuse, harassment, and I guess like sexism. That's another thing that comes up a lot in our surveys when we ask graduate students, like what problems are you facing? And they have a lot of problems facing their advisors. Oftentimes, 22% I think of University of Maryland students said they wouldn't be comfortable approaching their advisor with an issue. And the problem is that, the way that the University of Maryland handles that now is, well, we have a one-on-one. You'll have a one-on-one conversation, right? It's like, go to the person you're having the problem with first. Well, the person you're having the problem with is your abuser. That becomes a really huge issue. And you don't really have many other avenues to advocate for yourself. So I think that those are kind of the big ones. I guess my main point, my main takeaway is I've become really passionate about this recently because I feel like this affects everyone, and we've become so used to, again, the conditions that we live in, that we don't realize that it could be better if we simply had the right and ability to come together and really be advocates for ourselves to our employer, which would be the universities that we are employed by. So again, I'm also happy to answer any questions if anyone has any, and I do have infographics and some data on me, so let me know.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jonathan Beckett. Going last, everyone already explained everything so eloquently well, so I'll just add my brief tidbit. I've been on the GSA at Towson for 2 years, and in that experience, I've heard obviously a lot of testimonials from Towson grad students and graduate students throughout the state. So I will say that the meet and confer process at Towson is somewhat successful, but at the end of the day, it only can do so much. I have sat on a couple of meet and confers, I think maybe 3 in my 4 semesters or so. So it seems like every semester, new graduate students come along and ask the same questions, have the same issues with fees and rights and things like that. So it's really a process that I believe Tamara explained well, and you don't really know the things you're missing out on because you do get stuck in this certain way of living. So just seeing in my experience, every semester, people come on with the same issues that were already discussed in the previous meet and confer that still maybe haven't been resolved to their liking. Is just a great example of what we're talking about, the collective bargaining.
So good afternoon. I'm Liberty Devenbaugh from Bowie State University. This is my first meeting, so I'm very thankful that you all were willing to have me. As the new vice president for our Graduate Student Association and a graduate assistant myself, I think collective bargaining is probably one of the more beneficial tools that we should and could use. Thank you very much, Annie. So touching on points that have not been explored as much, a lot of the problems or a lot of the opportunities that could be expanded on at Bowie are in stability. You know, we have a severe breakdown in communication between administration and the student body as a whole. And while the GSA president and I are working very hard to bridge a lot of those gaps, we are 2 people. And I think collective bargaining would give us more of a voice and let us feel less expendable. You know, as a contractual employee, they kind of create this culture of, well, if you don't like your assignment, then you don't have to be a graduate assistant. You know, we're giving you the gift of tuition. Why are you complaining about the fees? And I would really like to see that culture changed. I would like to be paid for all of the hours that I work in a week. You know, I am very happy with my placement. I love my supervisor very much, happy to do as much work that he asks, but I'm only paid for 20 hours of it. And collective bargaining would give us an opportunity to maybe adjust some of that. We recently had a meeting on, I want to say it was Tuesday, but don't quote me on that because it's COVID and all days kind of merged together. But, you know, we had a meeting where the dean of the graduate studies office, who is the person that runs our program, was saying, well, you're welcome to work more than 20 hours if you like, but don't expect to be paid for it. You know, you're all adults. You can decide what you want to work and if you want to work. And if you don't want to work, then just let us know and we'll find new people. And I know that my institution is not the only one that has expressed ideas like that. I know that, you know, my situation is not unique in any way, and I would really love to see that changed. We deserve better. And to have our labor be provided and expected to be a certain quality but not paid for that quality, I don't believe that is fair or right. So, I'm not gonna keep going on and on, but thank you all very much for having me. I'm happy to talk to anybody if they have a question in the chat, things like that, but I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you so much, Liberty, Jonathan, Tamara, Autumn, and Rachel for coming to talk to us. Does anybody have any questions, any follow-ups they want to know about this bill? We'll be most likely sending out a vote for this next week, so we can figure out USMSC's position moving forward.
Hi, Laura. Is it okay if I ask a question?
Go for it, Megan.
Thanks. Thank you all very much for your work on this. I'm from UMBC's GSA, and we have a GAC, a Graduate Assistant Advisory Council. We met with Rachel and a few other really great folks going through the history of things. This year, UBC is taking a much deeper dive into the bill, recognizing where folks are coming at, maybe possibly matching our values. That's what I'll say for now. I have a few brief questions. I know that the bill is really just like removing the prohibition to allow collective bargaining, but what I'm wondering is what would happen after that? And I only ask those ifs because we've actually heard them from students, and we feel like, we represent students, we get the mandate from them, we'd like to be able to give them that info. So would this make, if graduate assistants decide to collectively bargain, would this be at an institution level versus the whole USM? And then would that make graduate assistants employees? So there's a lot of parts then to that question. Would that mean like we could negotiate salaries so that they're higher, so that we cover like the healthcare premiums and we're no longer FICA exempt, kind of the snowball questions that go from there. But I didn't know if anybody had kind of insight on that and the pulse on it. Thank you all for your hard work and all the analysis you've been doing on it. I know it's a lot.
I can take a stab at part of your question there, and I'll see if others want to chime in. And please feel free to ask again if I missed part of your question. So actually, the bill itself is very explicit that if graduate students gain the right, that if they choose to basically act on that right, then every institution must be considered a separate unit. So it actually says in the law what the potential next step would be, and it basically prohibiting the situation in which every single institution becomes one giant conglomerate. That it explicitly says that cannot happen. So every institution has to be treated as its own unit, which means every institution has to decide for themselves if they want to keep their existing system or they want to move forward in exploring different avenues for collective bargaining. The only way that could look slightly differently is if multiple schools, for example, decided they did want to collectively bargain and they somehow decided that they wanted to join the same union, then that union, who now has multiple contracts at multiple schools, just like they have contracts right now with a bunch of other classes of employees, could, leverage all of those contracts in like one big negotiation. So likely, if graduate students gain the right, different unions would be interested in supporting the organization of students in collective bargaining. But again, it doesn't necessarily mean that would happen, and every school has to make that decision for themselves. In every case that I've looked at within the context of the R1 research universities, many of them, most of them, I think the vast majority of them have graduate student unions. In all of those cases where graduate students have chosen to unionize, none of them have lost FICA exemption. So we are graduate students, of course, but as graduate assistants, they are acting as employees. And so collective bargaining helps extend those additional protections and additional rights, but it doesn't somehow mean you suddenly don't become a student. At least in every case in which we have a record of that occurring, there has been no case in which those students have lost their FICA exemption. So there's no reason to believe, especially because that's a federal level decision, there's no reason to believe that would happen to us. But I'll turn it over to some of the others if you want to add more detail.
There are a couple of hands up, maybe Dan's hand was up and then Niv.
I can just say that, Rachel, you actually addressed my question. My main question is going to be about the FICA exemption. So thank you for addressing that.
Dan?
Yeah, so I'm talking to Dan Latham about this tomorrow, but we're obviously going in support of graduates.
having collective bargaining rights. There is a concern though for undergraduates, as it specifically and explicitly states an undergraduate student employee, including a teaching, well, just any undergraduate student employee is exempt from this. And so that could provide issues down the line. If undergraduate students try to pursue something like this, I truthfully don't see that happening, just given our situations are very, very different between grad students, but that line is definitely concerning.
Yeah, and I know that that's also been a conversation. I'm on the Legislative Affairs Committee at the University of Maryland, and we have discussed that before also. So I guess I'm glad you brought that up. I don't have much to say about the matter, but I know that it is on our minds also.
What were the discussions?
I guess, yeah, mostly the concern, the fact that, undergraduates are exempted from this. Unfortunately, I think that it's a much harder sell. My understanding, it's a much harder sell to get undergraduates collective bargaining rights, which I think is unfortunate, because I think that anyone who is employed, should be able to voice their concerns with their employer. But, at the end of the day, we, again, can't really take a hard line on that right now. So.
I have something to add. So I'm also on GAC and FSE at College Park, which I probably should have been transparent about, so I apologize. So we were actually discussing this with FSE recently about the undergraduate concerns. And I know there are logistical reasons and I can't explain it, Alex Dumpy is a much better person to explain this, but there are actually, the legislator basically gave us a hard no on that we wouldn't be able to push this bill forward at all if we put that on there. So basically, like, if we allow that to occur right now, it prevents this bill from going anywhere. And then there's the other issue that undergraduate student unionization is very, very rare. I think the stats on it is there's only one in the nation right now. So I think that's some of the complications we run into. But I think members of FSE would be happy to support undergraduates in this flight if this is something they want to pursue in the future. I think this is just one small step in the right direction to get us where we need to be.
If you don't mind me asking, why did the sponsor give a hard no?
Politically, I mean, it's just a little differently. It's a little different between the fact that the system, given the number of undergraduates that make up the system, and that their work situations are typically hourly, and it's just a very challenging thing politically. There's a lot of reasons why. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why people don't want graduate students to collectively bargain. I think those things are accentuated when they're thinking about undergraduate students. So the bill in sort of its full intent has been pretty similar for the last several years. Well, 3 years specifically. So those 3 years, we know generally, the level of support for that, and its provisions have been, haven't really been altered much because of that. But yeah, to be honest, if undergraduates were extended that same right, the bill would be politically dead.
So is there are there next steps or a way to follow up with you all if there are maybe other questions or conversations that still need to be had?
I can put my email in the chat for anyone that needs it.
Well, I'll just emphasize again, I think there's, in addition to asking more questions, I think that's great. If you have more questions or there's something that's confusing, please ask anyone here. The other thing is